Great to see you. What's that?
That's what the setup was for. I love Nebraska.
I just love how you. I just love how you froze on that. You know. Hey, how are you, Senator? Good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you. Everyone, we have Senator Deb Fischer here, of course, Senator of Nebraska. And let me just tell you, I mean, if this is right, and I know the senator well, so Deb, you're on the Armed Services Committee, the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, which is completely relevant for today, Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry, as well as Rules and Administration and Appropriations. Are you leaving anything for your colleagues to do? That's a lot of committees.
I try to handle it all.
Well, it's really great to have you here. One of the things that you are responsible for is the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill, and we're discussing basically how do we revision and rewire a future around mobility and transportation in all of its form. We have the Association of American Railroads supporting today's program, but it's not just about railroads. But how do we get the equities right for America in rethinking and revisioning something that embraces technology where it helps, that gets the public interest right? What's on your radar screen?
You know, first of all, you have to figure out what goals you want to have in the use of all that really cool technology that's out there. And the goals I look at for innovation are always, how are we going to move people and goods faster, more effectively, and more safely? You know, and that's using technology, whether it's automation or AI or integrated work that we can do there, and even looking at different fuels for the future as well that are going to be able to drive that. And then, what's government's role? What's federal government's role? I won't address California and the sequoias, but I agree with your previous speaker. But what's government's role going to be there? And in Nebraska, I think we use a lot of common sense. We want to make sure that government regulations aren't more burdensome. We want to make sure that there are good choices made so that we can move more quickly. For example, NEPA, you were addressing that earlier. What would it look like if we didn't really require a NEPA process for programs that were $10 million or less? You know, think of how we could move those projects along. And then we're spending taxpayer dollars more wisely when we can move faster. You know, that's definitely a plus. Just think outside the box a little bit to be able to do that, but also know what your goals are. When I look at reauthorization, obviously, my number one goal is the Highway Trust Fund. To be able to make sure that we can continue to make those investments in the infrastructure, roads, bridges. That's my background. My dad was a civil engineer. He worked for the Department of Roads his whole career. He was the state engineer director for a couple governors. And so I grew up going on inspection tours on Sunday drives, and we'd be lined up by bridge abutments and things like that. We look like orphans, my two older brothers and I, in every family picture because we're lined up at construction sites. But through osmosis, I think I really gained such an appreciation for the investments in the future that are made when you invest in infrastructure.
So how do you fix the problem? I mean, I remember when I worked for Senator Bingham and we had New Mexico, one of the biggest news hits we would get each year was the distribution of the Highway Trust Fund money. And there was one year where there was a calculation error in the fifth year or something like this. And you know, I found the error. You know, we got the Clinton administration to restore the money. We had Roswell, New Mexico, really conservative, thanking Jeff Bingaman in 3 inch. Thank you, Senator Bingaman, for saving it's a tiny amount of money when you look at the whole side, but it's really a big deal. And my understanding is that trust fund account is not being replenished because we have a lot of EVs and, you know, the fuel taxes aren't driving it. So again, this is another area, just to come back to what I was discussing with Ian Jeffries, where kind of the different way we are doing things, technology is driving different circumstances that need to be absorbed. So how do you deal with that?
The Highway Trust Fund, the formula that's used, that basically is going to come down to who the donors are and who are the recipients in it. So I believe it's going to be hard to make any kind of change in that distribution formula. So instead,
But how about the inputs?
yeah, but instead we need to look at how do we increase revenue to the highway trust fund so we're not dependent upon general fund transfers, because the fund's going to be insolvent, I think, in 2028. So how are we going to be able to do that? At the state level, I chaired in the Nebraska unicameral, I chaired the Transportation Telecommunications Committee. And I introduced a bill that was passed where we added another trust fund, the Build Nebraska Trust Fund, and we took a quarter-cent of sales tax right off the top and put it in this fund for 20 years of building new roads to manage lane capacity and things like that. At the federal level, obviously, we have to look at how do we expand that user fee. I'm a huge supporter of a user fee. And EVs don't pay anything at the federal level. Some states have implemented fees, but at the federal level, they don't pay into their use of our roads and bridges that we have here in the United States. So I have a bill, the Fair Share Act, that would address that. And I know some of my colleagues, Bernie Moreno's also interested in doing that. We talk about it. Hopefully we can get something in reauthorization so that we do tap in to highway users. And it's to be able to keep that a user fee and pay your fair share.
Now I don't think this would be a surprise. You have a big ranch, or maybe a small ranch. I don't know how big is your ranch.
It's about a regular size ranch for our neighborhood.
Okay, so I assume you use trucking and rails and whatnot for your ranch, right?
I mean, we have truckers when we're sending our steers to market,
right?
Things like that. Yeah, you have to have cattle trucks come
and you
in.
got big rail in Nebraska. I'm just interested. You sort of look at this world as we're kind of looking, forward. One of the things that's come up repeatedly in earlier panels, but also my discussion with Ian Jeffries, is that there are different kinds of legislation, or different kinds of regulation. One is sort of looking at outcomes and figuring out, okay, you have freedom to mix and freedom to kind of get to whatever, but you have an outcome that you've got to be responsible for, and that's the regulatory hook, versus process where you're regulated in terms of looking at tracks, et cetera. I'm interested, does that kind of discussion come into something like an authorization act where you're able to look at the kind of regulation that might be more innovation friendly than not?
Well, I think it has to. And when you mentioned trucks, you mentioned rail, obviously.
And apparently they like each other now because of Ian Jeffries. Just that was, part of the conversation.
Ian can tell you my comment is always, which I used at the state level too, but my comment is always, I want my truckers and I want my railroads to get along, so don't ever make me choose who I love best. So
well, he made that clear today. Here, they're all cool.
Good.
Yeah,
nice job. But you need to understand that we're all integrated in this, and that's why obviously we have to look at freight and how the involvement is there, and our class ones pay for their rails. I try to help our short lines and things with grants, and because it's an important part of our entire system, as is the trucking. But the roads do the last mile of delivery from our great rail system we have in this country. And so we have to make sure that we have those investments in our roads as well to take care of that last mile. I mean, there's ways we can help on that with FMCSA, for example. Have them have the ability to levy penalties again, to be able to focus and be able to hold these businesses accountable. So there's other ways you can look at it.
Senator,
but to look overall to your question and overall guidance, I guess.
Right.
it's hard. It's hard in, I think, a country of our size, for one thing. The diversity we see across states and in states, within states as well, to be able to meet all those needs. And that's why we tend, as elected officials, to look at our own states, to look at our own districts, and it's more difficult to find a policy that would be overarching of the entire country.
You know, when you think about the future that's rushing towards us of automation, robotics, AI, smart cities, smart rural areas, a kind of much denser connectivity of everything in this space, what's your North Star when it comes to transportation? I'm really interested in whether or not you see stuff coming down the pike that would be really cool for the country if we only got it right. I just don't know if that's the way transportation bills are designed, around the cool next thing, or whether we are just saving and incrementally keeping all the old things.
Well, we have to maintain. That's a big part of it. And then you have to continually keep up with capacity challenges. So I think that's a rut. Maybe it's a okay rut, but it's still a rut.
Meaning that we don't have enough capacity?
We don't have enough capacity. I mean, that's why you have to increase lanes, or you have elevated freeways, whatever, so you can handle all the traffic that's out there. The way we can help with that is by encouraging innovation. And again, going back to, we can encourage innovation by our industry to not penalize them, but encourage them to take risks, to look ahead, to find a leader within government to be able to take on whatever that may be and be their champion for that, to push it ahead. But then you have to have government not throw up roadblocks, not hinder the development, but instead to incentivize it, to encourage it. And I think a lot of times the grants we have in the Department of Transportation are obviously for more building, when maybe they should be for more experimental projects out there, or at least not to hinder them.
We're getting near the end of our time, but I just want to, first of all, I love your work. I love the work you do in national security. We've had the pleasure of hanging out a lot. I'm interested in what the Deb Fischer mark on transportation is going to be. Like, what do you want? What's the legacy you want to leave of having changed one big thing? What would that be?
It would be that we need to rethink how we view transportation. And we need to view it always, my whole life, I've done this. We have to view it as an investment in the future. It is an investment in this country. It is an investment for our children, our grandchildren, for future generations. I remember my dad taking me out as he's planning some of the interstate system in Nebraska. And we went west of Lincoln. We're standing in a field as where the interstate's coming in. And he wanted people out in Seward County as they're headed into Lincoln to be able to see our Capitol building, which is a wonderful building. It's a Art Deco structure, tower on the plains. And to have that view coming in Lincoln made a huge impression on me.
That's fantastic. I'm going to give Ian Jeffries a chance to ask one question before we close up. Ian, do you have a question for the senator?
Well, first of all, thanks for being here. Thanks for your leadership across the board for so many years, not only to our industry, but to the entire supply chain. So in keeping with the reauth theme, one of the things we talked about is how do you create a structure that to your point, encourages innovation and testing and pilot programs in a kind of a safe environment that allows you to build the data that demonstrates you've got a new, better way to do something, and then be allowed to roll that into meeting the regulatory requirement. It's a big lift, but do you think that the statute and a reauth can be helpful in driving DOT, for example, to create that sort of model?
I think we can look at pilot projects without the fear that then the government's going to make them mandatory. You know, to unleash that creativity where entrepreneurs and innovators can come up with ideas that would not then threaten railroads, that would not threaten car makers, that the government's going to then mandate that they have to apply what a pilot project is developed to, I think, encourage that new development, those new ideas. And if those ideas can make it in a free market system without a government mandate, without more regulations, I think that takes away some of the fear of innovation for the future.
I always joke with Senator Fischer. I mean, I have really enjoyed getting to know the senator, but the reason we first bonded is she almost made me faint at a party for one of her staff members when she was describing in great detail how you birth a cow.
No, you don't birth a cow.
What do you do?
It's called calving.
Calving. Let me just tell you, calving does not even come close to capturing the drama of that.
Steve just about passed out, and so I embellished quite a bit.
So I just want to thank, she's a great friend, and I really appreciate your thoughtful approach on many of these issues. We wish you luck on this legislation. And Senator Deb Fischer, thank you so much for joining us today. And that is a wrap now. I want to thank Ian Jeffries and his team at the Association for American Railroads. I think this has been a deep dive into these issues and really appreciate all of you joining us. We've got a lot of stuff here, coffee, rolls, hang out, meet people you didn't know. And it's a great pleasure to have you all. So I hope you'll come back again. Thank you very much for joining us.